All right, let's get right into it. There's this destructive force, that can silently creep into any home and cause way more long-term chaos than even a fire or a major storm. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but man, it is relentless. We're talking about water damage, and today we're going to uncover the truth about this hidden flood.
So, I've got a question for you. What do you think is the most destructive, silent force that could be hiding in your home right now? It's something worth really thinking about, because the answer might be dripping behind a wall or slowly pooling in a corner as we speak.
And yeah, you've probably guessed it by now. It's water. What makes it so sneaky is how quietly it all starts. It doesn't always show up with a huge bang like a pipe bursting. Nope, a lot of the time it just starts with a whisper.
And take a look at these signs, because this is where it gets interesting. I mean, how common are these? That faint musty smell in the basement, a little bit of peeling wallpaper in the bathroom, or maybe some floorboards that just don't seem quite right anymore. We tend to write these off as, old house problems. But what we're seeing here is that these are actually the first clues, the early warnings that a much bigger problem is brewing just out of sight.
To really get a handle on how serious this can be, let's zoom in on a place where this risk is just off the charts every single day. We're going to use Seattle as a case study to see how the environment itself can turn a tiny leak into a total disaster.
So look at this number, 150. Plus, by itself, it doesn't mean a whole lot. But in the context of our story, well, it means pretty much everything.
Because that's how many days of rain they get in Seattle every year, over 150. That means buildings there are under a constant state of attack from moisture. It's not just about the big, dramatic storms. It's the relentless, day-in, day-out pressure of water trying to get in.
And it gets even more complicated than that. The soil there is heavy with clay, so when it gets wet, it swells up and literally pushes against the foundations of houses. The winters are so mild that the ground never really freezes, so groundwater is always moving, always looking for a weak spot. You combine that with older homes that were built before modern waterproofing, and you've basically created a perfect storm for water damage.
So you see how this is building? Because once that water finds its way inside, it is no longer a simple cleanup job. It instantly becomes a race against time, where every single hour matters. Now you might be thinking to yourself, come on, it's just water. How bad can it really be? Well, that's a super common misconception. It turns out, where the water comes from completely changes the game.
See, the pros break water damage down into 3 categories. Category 1 is clean water. Think a broken water supply line. It's a huge pain for sure, but it's not an immediate biohazard. Then you have Category 2, gray water. This has some contaminants in it, like if your washing machine overflows. But Category 3, that's black water. And that is the really nasty stuff. We're talking grossly contaminated water from sewage backups or outside flooding. It's a serious health risk.
And this is the critical window. The clock starts ticking the second that water gets in. Within just 24 hours, especially if it's warm or humid, mold can start to grow. And by the 48-hour mark, any of that clean water can become contaminated, and the risk of real, permanent structural damage just skyrockets. The stakes get higher with every single hour that passes.
So if you're up against that ticking clock, what's the right move? Well, let's take a look at the professional playbook. This isn't about guessing or just mopping things up. It's a systematic, scientific process that's designed to bring order to all that chaos.
It really boils down to 3 main phases. First, you've got that emergency call and getting a team on site as fast as possible. Second is the heavy lifting, extracting all the water and, this is the key part, doing a controlled dry out. And finally, step 3 is verifying that everything is 100% dry before you even start the full restoration.
And listen, this is not a job for a shop vac and a couple of house fans. We're talking about some serious specialized gear. Thermal imaging cameras that can actually see water hidden inside walls. Huge commercial-grade dehumidifiers and high-velocity air movers that create the perfect drying environment. And then moisture meters to prove, scientifically, that the job is truly done. It's also really important to understand this distinction. You've got mitigation and you've got restoration. Think of mitigation as the emergency response. It's like stopping the bleeding. The goal is to get the water out and get the structure dry to prevent more damage. Restoration is what comes next. That's the rebuilding part, replacing drywall, putting in new floors, painting, making everything look like it did before. They are 2 totally different but equally crucial jobs.
Just understanding that process is the first huge step on the path to recovery. It's all about knowing that a fast, and more importantly, a correct response can be the difference between a temporary headache and a long-term nightmare.
And if there's one thing you take away from all of this, it's captured perfectly in this quote. Improper drying leads to mold growth that costs more to fix than the original water damage. Think about that. The biggest danger isn't always the water itself. It's the mold that comes after a bad, incomplete drying job. That secondary damage can be way more expensive and destructive.
So, what's the bottom line here? First, a super fast response, getting on it within that 24-hour window, is your absolute best defense against mold. Second, remember that drying a building out properly is a science, not a guessing game. And finally, trying to do this yourself, well, it's a huge risk that can leave hidden moisture behind and cause even bigger problems down the road.
And that brings us to one final thought. After something happens, you might get things looking dry on the surface. But is your home truly, structurally, scientifically dry? Is it really protected from that hidden flood that might just be waiting for its next chance? That's the question worth thinking about.